Welcome into the Browns Report, everybody. I'm your host, Joey O'Donohue, and no matter where you're tuned in from, thank you so much for making today's show part of your day. Also, I've been challenged to an AFC North sub-battle here at Chat Sports. So, Steelers Talk got 75 new subs today. Ravens Channel got 23. Can we beat that, Browns fans? I know we can. Browns fans, show us that we're the best fans in the AFC North. Go ahead, subscribe right now so I can tell the bosses that the Browns know how to do it best. All right, coming up on the show, got a lot of Cleveland Browns roster moves to get to. First of all, they make 3 wild additions to the practice squad. I'll explain why these 3 players are being classified as wild. Also, 9 players return to the practice squad after being cut/waived by the Browns. Talk about some of those key pieces that I think you'll be excited to see. And then the Browns were awarded 2 waiver claims today. They were second in priority. We'll go over who those guys are and why that's good. All right, first wild addition is former Jets wide receiver Malachi Corley. Cleveland has signed Corley to the practice squad. Have you heard the name before? Well, Corley has some interesting lore, we'll say. First of all, a story from his rookie year where Davante Adams asked Corley for his jersey number 17. And Adams even offered Corley $20,000 for the jersey number. And what did rookie Malachi Corley say? He counteroffered star receiver Davante Adams and said, "I'll give it to you for $120,000." Well, the league had to step in and say Adams is the veteran. He can get the number. And Corley was cut from the roster and only has 3 career catches as a New York Jet. So, ballsy move of Malachi Corley to stand up to Davante Adams and say, "Hey, I want the number 17. You got to give me more than that, more than $20,000 if I'm going to give it up." The rookie making a bold statement. And a lot of people questioned his character afterwards. He also has this infamous play with the New York Jets in their game against the Texans. Yeah, you think he's stepping into the end zone for a touchdown, right? Well, he drops that ball an inch before he crosses the goal line. This was ruled no TD, one of his 3 career catches in New York. So a lot of question marks about Malachi Corley's character, but talent-wise, coming out of college, a lot of people looked at Corley as a stud. I mean, he had 29 career touchdowns at WKU, averaged 11.7 yards per reception, and people were comparing him to Deebo Samuel coming out of college. I mean, with the Browns having only 2 running backs on their 53-man roster, maybe they would use Corley in a Deebo Samuel type role, right? Someone who can get end-around carries, do a little bit of running back as well as wide receiver. If the Browns do call him up, I absolutely see him being used in that way. Not to mention in college, he had 2,070 yards after the catch in his last 3 seasons. He was nicknamed the Yak King, and that's why it ranked first in the FBS out of those 3 seasons. It was more than 400 yards more than any other player during that time span. Also, 77 forced missed tackles, which was second in the FBS. And Corley is a physical receiver. He's a tackle-breaking machine, as you see by the numbers. And like I said, yards after catch were his main plus coming out of college. He seems like another talented hothead in the National Football League, like a George Pickens, Antonio Brown, maybe even Deebo Samuel. He's had his moments, right? The only problem is we don't know if he's going to be that good talent-wise. If you tell me we're adding prime Antonio Brown, okay, I'd be hyped about it and deal with the issues. But we don't know what we're going to get with Corley. Like I said, hasn't really had much play in the NFL, was just hyped up a little bit coming out of Western Kentucky University. So I don't know if it's a character Cleveland needs in that room, but because of the pluses and optimism about his actual football ability, it's not a horrible addition to the practice squad for now. Another player that the Browns are adding to the practice squad is welcome back Bailey Zappe. You may remember him in Cleveland just last year to start in Week 18 for the Browns. Game didn't matter that much. He didn't play well at all in it. 2 picks. And I just don't know if I understand this move from Cleveland's perspective, right? We finally had the depth chart narrowed down to 3 quarterbacks in the mix this year. So when would Zappe be utilized, right? Can we maybe get another depth piece in the practice squad instead of Bailey Zappe? Shedeur Sanders was named a 3 recently. Dillon Gabriel will be the backup to Joe Flacco, our starter. And I just don't see why Cleveland needed to go out and get Bailey Zappe. When are we going to use him? I don't know. In fact, if they were going to bring in another quarterback to be in the practice squad, why didn't they keep Tyler Huntley? I saw a lot of fans in my comment section saying they wanted Huntley to be the backup. Never mind QB 4 or 5. So why move on from Tyler Huntley, who is back on the Baltimore Ravens practice squad, by the way, a reunion there, and go get Bailey Zappe, who has not had success as of late in the league? I don't understand the move. And could you imagine if the Browns brought up Zappe? God forbid Joe Flacco and Dillon Gabriel go down with any sort of injury, or there's another QB battle later in the season. Imagine they call up Zappe to start over Shedeur Sanders. The backlash on social media, if that happened, the Browns would be crucified. Shedeur should get an opportunity, and so should Gabriel, before we ever call up a quarterback who has not really done much in the NFL. So I don't understand that one. Another former Patriot in the mix for Cleveland now, as well as they add former first-round pick Cole Strange. He was drafted by Bill Belichick's regime in 2022, late in the first round for the New England Patriots. And Cole Strange not had much success since then either, even though he was a first-round pick. Well, you look at some of his grades in both pass blocking and run blocking, they're not high. Overall, only 47.3. So Strange has kind of struggled a little bit to be an impact player in the offensive line room. And I know Cleveland maybe needs some more depth there due to health concerns in the past. But Cole Strange doesn't seem like the answer to me. In fact, in his most recent preseason game, that's Cole Strange getting absolutely blown by in the red zone. This was his most recent game for the Patriots. And so nothing special has really been said about Cole Strange as of recently. These 3 roster moves are kind of crazy. And I don't mind it because it's just the practice squad. If you want to take a chance on a guy like Malachi Corley, sure. But Bailey Zappe makes no sense to me. And Strange, I'm indifferent about because, like I said, we need more room in that depth chart. But Strange hasn't really done anything notable to speak of as of late. So let me know in the comments. Get in there. Give me a number, 1 through 10. Rate these new additions for the Cleveland Browns. They are polarizing. So go ahead, drop a number down there. I want to see what you all think. Some good news for Cleveland is we have offensive players returning to the practice squad. So these guys didn't make the final 53-man. Some of them we were hoping would. Well, they have a chance to get back up and play during the season as they are practice squad members. That includes Sal Cannella, who had a great preseason and was becoming a favorite target of a lot of different quarterbacks put out there in the preseason for the Browns, including Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel. Kaden Davis, who had a couple touchdowns and some good returns in preseason, is back on the practice squad. That's good news. I like him having the option to be called up if Cleveland has any injuries in the wide receiver room this year again. Ahmani Marshall, glad to see him make the practice squad. We talked about him a little bit on the last show, and he had a great preseason. Great blocks in the back, some good rushes. His yards per carry weren't necessarily great, but he seemed like he was a promising young running back that Cleveland could utilize in a thin running back room. The same goes for Trayveon Williams, who will be on the practice squad, and Brenden Bates, who was waived today by the Cleveland Browns, is back on the practice squad if the Browns need to bring up another tight end. So I'm glad to see some preseason standouts staying on the practice squad and not being waived or cut for good, because I liked a lot of what we saw out of Davis and Marshall specifically, and the Browns having that option to bring them back is good for me. But it's not only offensive players Cleveland retained, it's some defensive returners to the practice squad, including Christopher Edmonds, Ralph Holley, LaMareon James, Sam Kamara, and Julian Okwara. I'm really excited Okwara specifically is being brought back to the practice squad. He had some impact plays in the preseason, including a massive hit on DTR that literally led to a pick six by KJ Henry going the other way. Also good to see LaMareon James will be on the practice squad because Cleveland will need some corner help eventually this year. And LaMareon James had some good preseason reps. I'm glad they're not letting him go like they did to Tony Brown. So I do think we will see a couple of those guys at some point this season. You could argue Kamara will get called up as well at some point, especially if there's any injuries in the defensive line room. I really like having those pieces specifically available for the Browns. Additionally, more moves in Cleveland. They were awarded 2 waiver claims today. So if you don't know how that process works, anyone that was waived is up for grabs. And so Cleveland, because they had the second pick in the NFL draft going into it, they traded down, obviously, to get the beast out of Michigan, Mason Graham. But Cleveland was second in priority. So anyone they wanted, as long as the Tennessee Titans didn't want them, were coming to Cleveland. And they got 2 guys that I think could really help. First of all, you may have heard the name Rocket Sanders in preseason so far. The former Charger running back had a great preseason, 6 foot, 230. He's a big, strong, punishing runner, an absolute beast to have as a third down back for Cleveland if they need, or just to bolster up that running back room in general, which is, like I said, only 2 running backs officially on the depth chart right now. No Judkins deal has been made yet. So he's a strong runner. I really like that he's on the practice squad. A lot of people, especially Chargers fans, were hyping him up so much, and having Raheem Sanders back there, I think, is going to be good for the Browns if they need more depth in that room, and if anything, if Judkins gets suspended, God forbid, and they need some more help in that room. Also claimed off the waivers for Cleveland, Jarek Bernard-Converse. Finally, some corner help. You know, I've been talking about it a lot on the show. I think Cleveland's going to need to call up one of them. Well, how about Bernard-Converse? 6'1", 205, out of LSU. And his Pro Football Focus preseason grades have been great. This season, his overall grade was 82.9. 2024, he was a preseason star as well for the Jets. A coverage grade of 92.3. That's elite. Cleveland needs a guy like him if they call him up from the practice squad eventually. But in order to get 2 players, you got to waive 2 after the 53. So Cleveland went ahead and waived Brenden Bates, but I told you he's back on the practice squad. And also to make room, they waived Dom Jones. So a little bit more lacking in the corner room, right? Well, maybe it can be a little bit of a battle with Bernard-Converse, and maybe they can bring up some more, because I do think eventually Cleveland will need to do so. I've been talking about this on the show a lot. That's why I'm glad to see the move of them going out and claiming Jared. But if Ward's health is not certain, as it hasn't been in years past, they're going to need some more depth. Seems like he's progressing really well, though, which is great. But Martin Emerson out for the year. And besides Newsome, there's not really a definitive CB3. So I think one of them should be brought up if Cleveland doesn't end up making another move for a corner. And something else that should fire you up is Chargers and Jets fans on Twitter were so devastated about the 2 losses of Sanders and Bernard-Converse. Literally, go on Twitter. You'll see them freaking out saying, it's a mistake. Can't believe it. That should hype you up, Browns fans, because we got them. They're coming home to Cleveland. Chargers and Jets fans, keep on weeping. So I want to know, are you excited about Raheem Sanders and Jarek Bernard-Converse? Type Y for yes, N for no. Now that you know a little bit about them, get in the comments. Tell me if you're excited and why. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to the Browns Report. Great day of Browns moves. Also, some polarizing ones. Let's talk about it in the comments. And remember to subscribe so we can win that AFC North sub battle. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you very soon here on the Browns Report.